Any evidence of the R value, Earth radius?
No way. If X is the mark and they can't prove it, there is no R value.
Well, the radius is kind of up for grabs at this moment, so it might be slightly bigger or something.
Slightly.
You know?
According to the Black Swan image, it's out of the circumference of the Earth would be the same as the claimed, begging the question, orbital trajectory, if that's the right word, of the moon around the Earth. That would be the circumference of Earth.
I think that plane flight from Charlotte might take longer. At 10 miles, at a 1 foot observer height, the radius of the Earth would go from this agreed upon by the ballers, 33,959. It would have to be 264,000 miles, the radius. And
the radius?
Much closer.
So, yeah. So the radius of Earth does become the begging the question orbital path. That's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, by 21,000 miles extra, because it's 249,000 to the moon, they say, and this would be, no, it's more than that. It's 264, so over 20-something thousand miles. It's so dumb.
Yeah, the Earth grows out to the size of where the moon currently is claimed to travel around us. Not that I'm in any way buying that bullshit either, but I'm just giving it in their mathematics just so people can visualise it. Obviously, most people are still wired in some sort of way to, picture these things in heliocentric terms. That said, most average Joes, I'll just drop this in, most average Joes don't actually appreciate how vast that distance is. If you were to describe to them how far out the moon was and, get them to draw it on a little diagram and say, right, draw a picture of the Earth, now draw a picture of the moon, roughly how far away you think it is in a rough scale. And they'd never get it right. They'd never get it anywhere near close. It's much, 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 much further than people anticipate. I remember seeing a YouTube channel once where they showed it with like a football and a golf ball, the golf ball being the moon and the football being the Earth, and they were like a considerable, more than 100 meters away from each other to get the scale right. They were a vast distance away from each other to show that scale. Jaron's done it a few times as well. Jaron's had his software with the heliocentric system in it on Jaronism, and he will show it to scale. And then, you'll see him clicking the mouse for ages and ages and ages to get out to a scale where it's a tiny dot, it's a single pixel on his screen to get the two in frame. And it obviously becomes a massive nightmare when you're trying to do it with the sun at those scales. But that's why I've tagged this onto the 2 questions. Any evidence of the R value, and then I was going to move on to any evidence of the distance to the sun. Hopefully tie those things into there. Go on.
Can I have chocolate do the Mr. Sensible at best?
Well, at best, what you've done is disprove the radius of the Earth. At best, of course.
Okay,
but
so
along those lines, to go back to the quote that I read earlier, Nathan, I dropped. Somebody has a response to that quote that I read and feels like I misread it. I posted that in Ballbusters. Somebody
the
can
M.
read
Scott
it.
Peach thing?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
You want to read that out for me? Because it's a little loud here, but...
Shaking my head, you took the exact wrong meaning out of what Michio Kaku quote law. Out of that. Just think about it. He's saying no one in a field of physics actually uses a strict scientific method. You think that's him admitting that they're not doing science? That's absurd. He's saying that the scientific method isn't required to do science. It's petulant in the extreme to imagine that you guys on the panel who have never actually done anything that anyone would call science have a better grasp on how to define it than the people who are actually making progress and adding to humanity's knowledge base.
That would be M. Scott Veitch, lying son of an astronaut. So he's got a lot to lose in this debate because his father, who's overtly lied to him and the rest of the nation about travelling to a second law of thermodynamics violation known as the sky vacuum, also called outer space. He hasn't been to outer space. His father was a liar. Now his son defends the lie, saying that what people call science, what science is the establishment of cause and effect. Science is the scientific method. Now, what he calls science is pseudoscience and lies in his instance, because he's parroting lies. He's got a little Quora section from him about how you can have gas pressure without a container because of gravity, something that definitely doesn't overcome entropy. It's a pseudo force, and not actual force, not forcing anything to do anything. But yet he's lying to people about it, and then defending the use of pseudoscience, things people call science. No, science is observing natural phenomena and trying to establish what caused it. That's science. It's very narrow. It's been hijacked because of its empirical nature. Science establishes cause through experimentation. It's empirical because you have a null. If A, then B. If A, not B. At the end of your experimentation, you validate or invalidate your hypothesis, making the method empirical. You either prove or disprove your assumed cause of the effect. Invalidating it if you get it wrong, validating it if you get it right. Empirical. Very useful for liars like M. Scott Veitch and his father to call their little trips into a fake place science. It's an outrage from liars. There's only a few people in this argument we can call liars. He's one of them. A liar. Now, what these liars do is they hijack science, an empirical method, and call trips in rockets science. No, they're not. But that's what they'll call them because they're lying overtly about the place they're travelling to. So they call their little trip to a fantasy place called space science. It isn't. It's pseudoscience. Overt lies in this man's case. Should we move on?
Like father, like son.
Yeah, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Where were all the real scientists when they were developing this heliocentric system? Wasn't there anyone that was fighting it?
Well, have you ever considered that it could have been their hobby project? That they were handed like, hey, this is something interesting, like futurism thinking, and they just worked on it, and then like industrialists basically used their work for mind control purposes. I think a lot of it was established that way, because a lot of these things are just based on natural conclusions based on presuppositions.
You know what I love though? My favorite part is the man himself tells you nobody in my field uses scientific method. And these guys will come in here and tell us, no, that's not what he really meant. What he really had meant is blah, blah, blah. Like, are you serious? This man himself tells you nobody in his field uses scientific method. So who am I supposed to take your word for it, M. Scott Veitch? When you want to tell me I'm wrong and I used his quote out of context? Come on, man. Get a grip. He's telling you himself. Don't be mad at me.
Yeah,
don't be mad at us because we're pointing it out to you, bro. Right?
Context is summarized in the quote, Chocolate. It's self-explanatory. He's talking and addressing directly the use of the scientific method. So there's no question about the context at all.
No. You guys are getting it all wrong. You are thinking about this way too much in actual speak. You know.
Oh, you mean the really is level?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's where my brain operates. I don't operate in the fantasy second law of thermodynamics violation place that your father went to, M. Scott Veitch, and you think you're proud of that. Meanwhile, the guy's telling you we don't use scientific method, and you're like, nah, what he really meant? Nah, I'm good. I don't need you to translate English for me, my friend. Thanks.
Right.
Hey, Nathan.
Why would you take what he says literally when you can think exactly the opposite of it, which is more in political advantage of where you want to go? You know?
Indeed. Go ahead, Tenth
Nathan, I posted something in Master B. If you could post this from Andrew Thomas Young, and it's going to validate Arwen's point. All the discussion above deals with plane surfaces, period. But the Earth isn't flat! Exclamation point. Arwen said the key word, presupposition. They are told the Earth is a globe and we're spinning all these different directions. So when they go to do their pseudoscience, they have that as the begging the question presupposition that they got to match. So here he is saying, everything I've done is over a plane surface, but I've got to match it to the Earth not being flat. So Arwen nailed it.
Perfect.
Can I reiterate another quote by the same man?
If you can do
because
it in 30
maybe
seconds.
You want to tell me.
Yes,
maybe you want to tell me how I misquote this, right?
Well,
quote, usually in science, if we're off by a factor of 2 or a factor of 10, we call that horrible. We say something's wrong with the theory. We're off by a factor of 10. However, in cosmology, we're off by a factor of 10 to the 120. That is 1 with 120 zeros after it. This is the largest mismatch between theory and experiment in the history of science.
Notice he uses the word experiment, a very specific term in science.
Exactly.
Yeah. So he's talking contextually about the scientific method when he uses the word experiment. This is a trained astrophysicist, so he knows what experiment is. It's contextual and specific. Last but by no means least, just because we're running out of live air. So any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
No.
None whatsoever.
But can real quick, I know we're about to end, but can I point out one more thing?
Go ahead.
Look how he actually separates cosmology and science. Right? He starts the quote with "in science," blah blah blah, but then he says he turns it to "but in cosmology." Oh, so does that mean cosmology is not science? Well, thank you very much, Michio Kaku. Appreciate that.
I thought it was brilliantly honest, really.
It is absolutely brilliantly honest, Darwin. You're not wrong. With that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you tuned in live on the Nathan Oakley 1980 Premier.